Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to be talking about Get Rich Quick by Peter Doyle.
Oh, great choice.
If you need a little extra motivation today, be sure to check out affirmifyjourney.com. Their personalized zodiac affirmations are really great. But for now, let's dive into this gritty crime novel set in post-war Sydney. It was written in 1996, but really resonates even today.
It does.
We'll be following the story of Billy Glasheen, a small-time hustler trying to make it in a city overflowing with ex-soldiers and gangsters. Oh, and we can't forget about the youth culture that was emerging at the time, completely enamored by American music. We have excerpts from the book itself, so we'll be hearing Billy's story and meeting those memorable characters firsthand.
What I think is really fascinating is how Doyle just drops us right into 1950s Sydney. We're talking about a city that's still recovering from World War II,
Yeah.
but also embracing these trends like jazz and rock and roll straight from America.
Yeah, it's a city that's definitely trying to find its footing.
For sure.
And illegal gambling was a huge part of life back then,
Yeah.
especially SB bookmaking.
Oh, yeah, totally.
It was so tied up with organized crime and even police corruption. It really sets the stage for Billy's world, where opportunity and danger are practically inseparable. And loyalties, well, let's just say they're constantly shifting.
Yeah, you can't really trust anyone.
No, not really.
So tell me about Billy. He seems like kind of a complex character.
He is. He's this charming rogue, a true survivor who knows how to navigate the city's underbelly. But he's also cynical, operating in this really morally gray area.
Which makes him even more interesting, right?
Oh, yeah. One thing that really sets him apart is that he didn't serve in the war.
Interesting.
And in a society where military service was so highly valued, that makes him an outsider. It just adds another layer to his struggles.
I can imagine. It's like he's always trying to prove himself.
Exactly. And then you have his relationships, which are just as complicated, like his thing with Molly.
Mm-hmm.
It's so on again, off again.
So I guess that would be like a classic bad boy, good girl scenario.
It is, in a way.
Mm.
She's incredibly independent and doesn't want to be tied down, which, of course, both attracts and frustrates Billy.
They definitely don't make it easy for each other.
Not at all. But honestly, their dynamic feels so modern, don't you think?
Yeah.
It really reflects how women's roles were changing during that time.
For sure. It's like she's a woman ahead of her time.
Totally. And then you have Laurie, his former mentor,
Mm-hmm.
who turns into his rival. He represents that dark side of ambition, willing to do whatever it takes to get ahead, even if it means betraying those closest to him.
It's interesting how you have these two characters, Billy and Laurie, kind of mirroring each other.
Oh, definitely.
They both want to succeed, but they go about it in very different ways.
Yeah, Billy's more of an opportunist, while Laurie is more of a strategist, a manipulator. It's a constant power struggle between them.
It's like a game of chess with really high stakes.
Exactly. And as Billy's story unfolds, we see all these seemingly unrelated events and characters start to collide.
It's like that saying, it's a small world,
Yeah, it is. There's a real web of interconnected plots that just keeps you guessing.
So it's not just a straight-up crime story, then.
Oh, it's so much more than that. You have the murder of Charlie Ferner, this local tough guy, and, of course, Billy gets caught up in the investigation, trying to clear his name. Then you have these crooked cops like Ray Waters and a glimpse into this shadowy world of the Ustasha.
Ustasha.
Yeah, they were this Croatian nationalist group with, well, a pretty dark past.
Okay, I'm definitely getting the sense that in Billy's world, appearances can be deceiving.
Oh, yeah. You never really know who to trust, and motives are always suspect.
It's all about survival, I guess.
It is, and a lot of it ties back to this whole get-rich-quick thing that's so central to Billy's life. He's always chasing easy money, looking for that shortcut to success. But his schemes almost always backfire.
It's like the universe is trying to teach him a lesson, right?
You could say that, but he's not really great at learning from his mistakes.
But in a way, it makes him relatable. We've all been there, right?
Yeah.
Trying to find that easy solution.
Oh, yeah. Especially nowadays with all the get-rich-quick stuff you see online.
So true. It's everywhere you look.
But Doyle's novel really reminds us that true success doesn't come from taking shortcuts. It's about hard work and making ethical choices.
It's about the journey, not just the destination.
Exactly.
And as we follow Billy through this story, you see him having to think on his feet constantly. Whether it's that rowdy crowd or navigating Sydney's criminal underworld, he always has to adapt.
He definitely doesn't get a moment's rest. Makes you wonder if that adaptability is the most important skill to have in a world that's always changing.
Well, it's definitely key to his survival in the book. And that theme of adaptability, it's kind of mirrored in those bigger changes Doyle shows us, right? Like rock and roll emerging and shaking up traditional Australian culture.
Yeah, it's like that music represents all those anxieties and uncertainties of the time after the war when people were trying to figure out what was next.
Exactly. And Billy kind of embodies that in his own way, trying to figure out his place in a world that doesn't play by the old rules anymore.
And speaking of old rules, there's that scene where Billy's paying off the bouncers at the stadium in Newcastle. It really shows you how the entertainment world works, the power dynamics behind the scenes.
Oh, right, right. You see the stadium manager all stressed out about crowd control and the potential for things to get out of hand.
Exactly. He wants to make sure everything runs smoothly, even if it means making deals with someone like Billy.
It's kind of like saying the ends justify the means, right?
Yeah, you can see it that way.
Yeah.
And Billy, with his street smarts and negotiating skills, he's able to work all that to his advantage. He becomes this go-between, making sure everyone gets what they want, at least on the surface.
On the surface, but underneath all that, you can feel this tension, like things could explode at any moment.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And then Gene Vincent, with his crazy stage persona, jumps off the piano and into the crowd. Talk about rock and roll chaos. It's exciting, but also a bit terrifying if you're the one in charge.
It's like a force of nature you can't really control.
Exactly. And the fact that the manager's so worried about another riot like the one with Bill Haley adds to the anxiety.
Oh, right, when those fans went on a rampage?
Yeah. It shows you how scared authorities were of rock and roll. Like,
Right.
it was this dangerous thing that could upset the social order.
They probably saw it as a threat to their way of life.
Oh, absolutely. It's amazing how Doyle weaves all this together. The characters, the cultural changes, and those political anxieties of the Cold War.
It's all connected.
It is. And he captures the Australian landscape so beautifully, both its beauty and its harshness. Like that scene where Billy and Dell are driving with little Richard and his band and run into bushfires.
It's almost like a metaphor for all the upheaval and change happening in the story.
Oh, I like that. It really shows the power of nature and how fragile life can be when faced with something like that.
Nature doesn't care about our plans. It does its own thing.
No, it doesn't. And against that backdrop, you see these relationships unfold. There's this scene where they encounter a group of Aboriginal people camping by the road. It's a reminder of the history of colonialism and how Indigenous Australians were dispossessed of their land.
That's a really important point.
It is, and it shows how even during this time of supposed progress, these social inequalities were still there. It's interesting to see Billy's reaction to this encounter. He's actually pretty respectful and empathetic.
What you might not expect from someone involved in the criminal world.
Right. It shows that even people who operate outside the law can still recognize injustice.
It's like he has this underlying sense of fairness.
Yeah. And as the tour goes on, little Richard becomes even more religious, and he actually ends up throwing the rest of his jewelry into the Brisbane River.
What?
Yeah, it's pretty dramatic. It's like he's renouncing material wealth for something more spiritual.
It makes you think about faith and how our material desires can sometimes conflict with our spiritual aspirations.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And of course, Doyle throws in some humor. It turns out that the jewelry Richard threw away was stolen.
Of course it was. Only Billy could end up in a situation like that.
Right. But Billy's reaction is interesting. At first, he's frustrated about losing the jewelry, but then he starts to respect Richard's sincerity.
It's like he's starting to see beyond the hustle, beyond the material stuff.
Yeah. And speaking of unlikely friendships, Billy's time with Eddie Cochran on tour leads to some really funny moments.
Oh, Eddie Cochran, he was a real character.
He was. Like that time they went shopping for pajamas for little Richard.
Oh, I remember that scene. Such a simple task turns into this crazy adventure.
Yeah, and then, of course, they get mugged for the pajamas. Classic Billy.
It just goes to show you never know what's going to happen in Billy's world.
Never a dull moment. But it's that humor that keeps the story from getting too dark.
It's that balance that makes it so enjoyable. The serious stuff with a bit of lightheartedness mixed in.
Exactly. And as the tour comes to an end, Billy runs into some new challenges, like when he meets Shoebridge at the Metropole Hotel. That's a turning point for him because he realizes he's been manipulated.
That whole espionage angle is so interesting.
Yes. And it shows how the Cold War created this atmosphere of paranoia and distrust. Billy's caught in the middle of it all, a pawn in this bigger game he doesn't even fully understand.
It makes you think about how vulnerable we all are to those bigger forces at play.
Right. And it gets worse when he finds out Igor, the supposed double agent he's been working with, has disappeared with all the stolen money.
Double-crossed again. Poor Billy.
I know, right? He has to figure out who he can really trust, which is pretty difficult in his line of work.
It's a dog-eat-dog world.
It is. But Billy's not one to give up easily. He gets Max and Dell on board, and they cook up this plan to get the money back.
They're quite a trio.
They are. And that confrontation with Bosco and the Ustasha is intense. You really see Dell's bravery there, especially with her sharpshooting skills.
She's not afraid to stand up for herself.
No, she's not. And of course, there's that moment of dark humor when she accidentally shoots off one of Bosco's fingers.
Doyle really knows how to balance those intense moments with a touch of absurdity.
Yes, it makes the characters in the story feel more real, more human.
So they finally track down Igor at that migrant hostel in Metroville. That place is like a microcosm of Australian society at the time, isn't it?
It is. All these people from different cultures trying to build a new life. And in the middle of all that, Billy's trying to get his money back.
High stakes negotiation.
Yeah. But they actually find a solution that works for everyone, which is surprising.
It shows that even in the most tense situations, compromise is possible.
It does. And it's a testament to Billy's resourcefulness. He always manages to figure things out.
He's a survivor, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And then you have his reunion with Molly after she comes back from America. It's a really bittersweet moment. Their relationship has always been complicated, and now she's with Marty J., a successful American comedian.
Things have definitely changed.
They have. It forces them to face their past, to really see how much they've both grown and changed.
And to decide if there's still a place for each other in their lives.
It's a tough situation.
It is. But their conversation is so well written. You can feel that awkwardness, the longing, all those unspoken feelings.
It's heartbreaking, but also hopeful in a way.
I agree. Their story might not have a typical happy ending, but it shows how powerful love can be and how important it is to let go sometimes.
Letting go is never easy.
No, it's not. But while all this is happening, Billy also starts to reconnect with Lori. Their fishing trip to Towler's Bay is like a pause, a moment of peace for them to try and repair their relationship.
Laurie really seems to have changed.
He does. He's willing to be vulnerable with Billy, to admit his mistakes. It shows that even someone who's caused so much pain can still find redemption.
It's never too late to try and make things right. And then Laurie decides to marry Molly, and Billy and Dell are the witnesses.
It's kind of a full circle moment, isn't it?
It is. A bittersweet ending, for sure. But it shows that new beginnings are always possible, even after heartbreak.
And Billy going to the wedding, even though he was hesitant at first, shows how much he's grown. He's finally able to forgive Lori and let go of the past.
It's about accepting things as they are and moving on.
Exactly.
Mm.
And then Billy decides to buy Lori's house in Towler's Bay. It's like he's claiming a piece of his past while also creating a new future for himself.
It's a fresh start, and in that last scene, Billy's reflecting on how everything's connected, how chance and fate play a role in our lives.
It's almost philosophical, isn't
It
it?
is. It makes you wonder if there's some kind of hidden order to things, even when life feels chaotic.
Right. It's a thought-provoking way to end the book.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting how Billy's story unfolds against the backdrop of a society that's going through so much change.
Oh, absolutely. The 1950s in Australia was a time of huge upheaval. You had the country recovering from the war, all these immigrants coming in from Europe, and the Cold War looming over everything.
It's really amazing how Doyle captures that feeling of anxiety and uncertainty that people must have felt. You see the characters always looking for security, whether it's financial or social status or just wanting to belong somewhere.
Yeah, it's like they're trying to find solid ground in a world that's shifting beneath them.
Exactly. And you could say Billy's obsession with getting rich quick is a symptom of that. He's looking for that easy solution, that one big win that will solve all his problems.
But it never really works out that way, does it?
No, those shortcuts rarely lead to anything good. They usually just create more problems and bad decisions.
It's like a vicious cycle. And it's a good reminder that real success in any area of life takes work, perseverance, and doing things the right way.
There are no shortcuts to a truly meaningful life.
Exactly. And on the topic of doing things the right way, Doyle really explores the complexities of morality in this book. His characters are always facing these tough choices, these situations where right and wrong aren't so clear-cut.
Yeah, they're constantly caught between wanting to do the right thing and the temptations and pressures of their world. Like Billy, he's not a bad guy at heart, but he does some pretty shady things to survive.
It's like he's forced to compromise his values just to get by.
Exactly. And it makes you think about morality itself. Like, is it absolute or does it depend on your circumstances? How much can we justify our actions even when we know they're wrong?
It's a really thought-provoking question. And Doyle doesn't give us any easy answers. It's up to us as readers to figure out where we stand.
To examine our own moral compass and think about how we would act in those situations.
For sure. But even amidst all those moral dilemmas, there's this strong sense of loyalty and camaraderie between the characters, especially Billy and Max.
They really do have each other's backs through thick and thin. Their friendship is a constant source of support.
It's a reminder that real friendship can endure anything, even disagreements and mistakes. And that loyalty isn't limited to Billy's closest friends either.
You see it with Dell, with Tommy and Annie McGrath, even with Lori, despite how complicated their relationship is.
It's like even in this world where everything's kind of rough and unforgiving, there's still room for compassion and empathy, for taking care of each other.
Exactly, and I think that's one of the most powerful messages of the book. Even in the midst of chaos and uncertainty, you can still find beauty in those human connections and acts of kindness, in those moments of grace.
I couldn't agree more. It's a story that really encourages us to look deeper, to see the humanity in the people around us, and to try and make the world a little bit better, a little bit more compassionate.
Well said. And if you're interested in exploring more stories like this or learning about other fascinating topics, be sure to check out lingopediamagazine.com. They have a ton of great courses and ebooks.
Oh, yeah, that's a great resource.
And remember to subscribe, share, and like this deep dive. It really helps us out.
We appreciate it.
So, to sum it all up, Get Rich Quick is so much more than just a crime novel. It's a social commentary, a glimpse into history, and a story about what it means to be human. It's a book that stays with you long after you finish it, making you think about your own life, your choices, and your place in the